Well, an exciting start to the morning. Our festival is really underway now. So we figured one of the key subjects, and two of the key words that seem to pop up a lot amongst the industry, is content and content marketing. So we thought, what better way to showcase how it should work, what we should do, how we should curate content, how we should distribute it. What should the strategy be? Well, to help us cover that minefield, to give us some insights, to provide you with some solutions to your everyday work challenges, we have three fantastic speakers. We're going to mix it up a little bit, so each one of them will be doing a snappy TED-style talk. So the first one of our illustrious speakers for this particular topic is going to be Paul Marcum, who is the president of Truffle.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I got to say that being part of what I think was billed as the Holy Trinity here for this session, and being part of the Holy Trinity in Rome is not something that the priests who taught me in high school foresaw, but I'm thrilled to be part of it. Content is an incredibly important part of what we do at Truffle. We are a brand and content agency for marketers who publish and publishers who market. And we're here to talk about how so much of the landscape is changing in terms of what the content opportunity looks like. This line, great line, published back in 1967, and yet it's never been more true. Great stories are autonomous. They take on a life of their own. They travel. But what he could not foresee back when he wrote this line was just how much the pipe would change. The pipe has evolved. It's gone from a single pipe to a handful of pipes to ultimately what we have today, which is an always-on, ubiquitous, infinite, and all-inclusive content feed that we all enjoy every day. And that feed is driving what content becomes great and what content becomes autonomous. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But what's important about this feed, too, is that it's true for all of us. We're no longer just publisher or marketer. We're really doing the same thing. That whether you're paying for the feed to enter into the feed or whether you're expecting your audience to tune into you there, the imperative is the same. We all have to earn our position in our audience's feed. The content that we create, whether it's a news story or whether it's a brand message, has to find its way into our users' feeds. And that's a high bar for us all to clear. So how do we do that, whether we're a brand or whether we're a publisher or we're a publisher with a brand? Everybody in this room can relate to that. One thing that we all have to pay attention to is velocity. So since I got up on stage 2 minutes or so ago, what's on my feed has changed. What was on Snapchat 24 hours plus ago has now disappeared. What has been posted on Facebook that might have been liked has now appeared. Stories, it's 6 a.m. in New York, Donald Trump's probably insulted somebody, maybe that has appeared. Content is constantly refreshing, constantly changing. And if you and your partners aren't prepared to work within the velocity that is part of this feed, you're ultimately out of step with your audience itself. They are tuned in, they are jacked into this feed, and they are moving with it quickly. And that means that your approval structure to your cost structure to the way you operate and communicate with your audience needs to adjust as well. Serialization. So what happens when content becomes autonomous? What happens when content is consumed outside of the homepage? You probably have seen how little people actually visit a homepage in mobile traffic today. It ultimately has a tremendous impact on the brand. Serialization, whether that is taking a story and breaking it into parts over days, taking a brand campaign and running it over months, or taking, say, a publisher and creating a never-ending series of listicles over years that defines how news is consumed by a particular generation, is an opportunity to provide meaning and actually brand within that feed and to have some ongoing sense of continuity. We're also seeing this as an opportunity to, when people take a break from their feed, to go deep within content, to actually Netflix-icize, where they're engaged in content that's particularly appealing to them, they binge. And by being able to create content that connects to each other, you're able to enter into that type of environment, that Netflix type of environment. But just as important, of course, is dealing with these dynamics of velocity and making sure that the content is connected, is actually saying something important. And great line here, do not talk unless you can improve the silence. And that's true for publishers, of course. It's also true for brands. And we see today it sounds sci-fi, but we have to recognize that our audience is a more advanced, more intelligent life form than they may have ever been before. It sounds goofy, but I came to Rome yesterday. I haven't been here in years, yet I was able to pull out my phone, enter into a car without missing a beat, tell the driver exactly how to get to my destination, order up a couple of different services while I was in that car, and at the same time tell my friends exactly where I was. We're beginning to take for granted the power we have as consumers, and you have to recognize that when you're talking about content, when someone takes a break from your content experience, they have power, they have intelligence that is amazing, insurmountable, and historically never been seen before. And you ultimately have to add value. When we don't add value, we become noise. And when we don't add value, we build experiences together, publisher and marketer, which spur people to adapt all sorts of technologies which ultimately allow them to ignore that noise. And so as content producers, we have to ultimately always strive to add value. And we have to recognize that there is an opportunity for us to actually decode complexity, to make our content provide a simpler view of the world, a more straightforward view of the world, just like when you order that car through Uber or Lyft or whatever it may be, just when you interact with some of the best designed experiences in your mobile handset. How does the content that we create provide just that same level of utility? And in terms of data, this is an area of so much obsession for users, or for we in marketing and we in publishing, but it's really quite simple. It's always being oriented to not swim upstream. And the key part to this is that often agencies are hired with creative briefs, but how often are they actually hired with data briefs? How often do you commission a story? How often do you commission a campaign with the expectation both of where that content is going to perform, but also what format that data is going to be delivered back to you? Publishers historically have been doing this much better, but ultimately marketers and brands have been slow to do this in real time and keep pace with that feed. Mobilization. If you have a fan, you ultimately have an opportunity to inspire action. And it's key that we as content producers always understand this. We can tap into passions. Now, I'm not anywhere near as much of a fan of soccer or football as this quote is, but that doesn't mean that this audience won't be engaged to mobilize if you hit them with the right message. Passions are out there, and there's always an opportunity for publishers to connect with that, whether it's a brand or as a marketer. Influencers. When I look at influencers, I frankly just think of what I would call micromedia. So smaller, more targeted opportunities to connect with audiences of passion, and ultimately to open up new opportunities for a brand or a publisher to reach their audience through the feed, to give another opportunity for us to actually connect with our audience and to grow within a particular community of passion. And it's an incredibly important opportunity for us. Because ultimately what we're seeing here is a shift in brand dynamics. We're seeing a shift in loyalty. It's not so much that we as brands are subservient to the consumers or that we're kissing their ring, but rather that we're meeting together in a space where we as publishers are providing service that just as valuable to your user as the ability to summon a car or to operate a device remotely is the ability for us to provide an ongoing connection of brand value through content, through their feed, in a way that there is a mutual expectation, and that marketing, ultimately, whether you're a publisher or whether you're a traditional brand, takes on a level of service that it hasn't before. We're constantly testing as part of this. Art and science together is what creates content that actually works. If you look at this great line, basically says, "I've never painted a fat." He is, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, he's acknowledging that he has a form, he has a style, he has an approach that is ultimately single-minded and is a narrative that he alone is pursuing. and is a recognition of the value that he can derive. And as marketers and brands, we ultimately have to do that as well. We have to pursue the art. We have to pursue an ability to tell our stories consistently. And we have to do that through a few incredibly important tools. Visual vocabulary is an essential part of what we offer as storytellers, as content providers today. And whether that is the imagery you might see through video, or whether it's the complex combination of illustration, video, and photography that we're able to deliver through Snapchat, we're ultimately constantly evolving this vocabulary and mining new forms to deliver this engagement to our users. Atomization. A lot has been written about this, but ultimately it's the tailoring of content to map against user intent wherever they may be. We have to recognize that content does not travel equally from one destination to another, that it needs to be adapted and moved. And then finally, some thoughts for the future. We have an opportunity to begin to move differently, and we have an opportunity to think about new forms of content. When you actually work within so many different formats, you start to think about new ways of engaging storytellers in audiences with stories. And odor is certainly one of the next on our list. And we're not going to be able to get into it too much here today, but I invite you to start coming to our site at Group SJR, where you can actually see some experimentation on what odor looks like on, we go to the next slide here, odor actually looks like as a brand storytelling device. And thank you very much. Available for questions. Paul at trufflepig.farm. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Next up on stage is Michael Pennington, part 2 of the Holy Trinity of Content. Michael Pennington, Sales Director for Tumblr.
Buon pomeriggio, amici. I'm Michael, and my job is advertising director at Tumblr in EMEA. And we like to think we know a thing or two about content. Our mission and our aim is to be the place on the web where users, where artists, where creators, where brands can create with the most passion possible in any format that they want to, and have their content fly and be shared. But I think it's fair to say that we're in a true revolution of what content is, and the forms with which it's being distributed, the point of consumption, the definition of content has truly, truly changed. I mean, is content just storytelling? Are GIFs allowed to be included? Vines, cinemagraphs? Who decides what content is, and who is the source of content? I mean, it's very easy to be bewildered. And yet, if you look at where marketing is going, and if you look at where digital marketing is going, there seems to me to be two roads. One is the road to the left, which is the ever-increasing rise of programmatic advertising, getting the right ad to the right people at the right time at scale. But to your right, you have content marketing. And I saw an Enders report which suggested that content marketing will grow by 184% to 2020 and will become a $2.12 billion business in Europe alone. So what does that mean for all of us? At Tumblr, we have this wonderful phenomena that happens now and then, which is the 1 million note post. And I love checking in on the 1 million note post because it allows me to see the type of content that is popping, how it's created, the form that's in. And I'm willing to bet that probably no one in this audience recognizes this young woman. That's Margaret Hamilton. Margaret Hamilton was the lead software engineer on the Apollo project, and she was responsible for writing, by hand, the stack of code that enabled mankind to travel to the moon. And you can't read them probably, but the comments are amazing. They're things like, file this under women you never hear about. Or, you always hear about the first man on the moon, how come you never hear about the first woman who made it possible? And I love this post because it speaks to the heart of what Tumblr is really about. Human empowerment, betterment, gender equality, women in science, but more importantly, undiscovered stories and new ways of telling those stories. So this isn't a 20-page document from the government on the role of women in science, nor is it a BBC documentary on how we actually made it to the moon. But it seems to me that it's just as powerful as talking about the role of women in science. And you see that 1 million people have engaged with this. It really means that something's being excited there. And so what's very powerful for me is that as often as there is a watermelon exploding that grabs people's attention, there's also a story that wins over the hearts of mankind. And it's the way in which those stories are being told that has changed, because users are choosing how they tell our stories. And the quandary for brands is, are we truly mirroring the way that people on the streets are telling stories? And are we opening up our assets and our storytelling to them so that they can remix our stories and share them with their friends? Because vocabulary has fundamentally shifted. Now, we're all aware of the hyper-visualization of the new content discourse. And I love putting this slide up to a room full of white men like myself, because nobody seems to be able to translate it. Yet if I put this slide up to 13, 14-year-old, 15-year-olds, they get it in a minute. So I want to make 2 points here. One, there are reports that suggest that 50% of comments on social media are emojis. And two, if we as sellers, as marketeers, aren't speaking the language of the people that we're selling to, if we see this just as hieroglyphics, how are we getting our right message across? So that you know, these is the lyrics to the famous Katy Perry song. I used to bite my tongue and hold my breath, scared to rock the boat and make a mess, so I sit quietly. It wouldn't be a media conference if I didn't stand up here and talk about mobile, but it is an unavoidable fact that the point of consumption of media has leapfrogged from TV through print, through PC, through mobile, and into app. And are we as marketeers truly optimizing for mobile devices yet? I really don't think we are. We're not building vertically yet, and we're not popping out. Because the delivery mechanism of content has fundamentally changed. And I'm referring to two things here. First of all, we've ended the days when primary source to end user dictated the consumption of content. We're now in an era where consumption goes sideways from user to user. But are we as brands truly enabling our content to flow easily from user to user? Second thing is that content consumption now happens within a stream, right? So whether it's my Tumblr stream, my Snapchat stream, my Twitter stream, and are we as brands fitting authentically into that stream, but yet resonating enough to pull out and engage? And I'm not sure that we're there yet, and I'm not sure that we've really thought about the stream as a delivery method. And this raises huge questions and this state of flux between publishers. And I don't just mean the news organizations, I mean all of us as publishers, and the role that distributors play. So if you think about, what's Google doing, what's Facebook's doing, what we're doing, and how are you migrating to that model where they're taking control of what's pushed out there? It's a really interesting paradigm that's going to mean not just a dance between publishers and distributors, but a life and death struggle. I think one thing is really clear. We all have to be like Mama Isa, who's a famous Italian chef, and she publishes her stories daily on Tumblr. But you have to be embedded into the social ecosystem if you want to survive, whether you're a brand or whether you're a user. So I think the real question, though, is what are we all doing? How are we reacting to the changes in delivery point, into the change of what content actually is, the forms in which it's being shared? Have we moved into that app experience? And you could sit here and you could ask me, what would you do and what would you be doing? And I want to pull it back to that photograph of Margaret Hamilton. Because the true story of the matter is that let's end this preconceived notion that millennials are not interested in anything but pop culture, because that simply isn't true. And I think we've almost reverted to a sort of 1970s mentality where there's deep interest in things like gender equality, human rights, civil rights, the economy, politics, and so on and so on. So I say, come back to inspiration. We all welled up when that P&G Mums ad appeared because we were all inspired by it. And the truth of the matter is that anytime we do research on any of our programs, if you're inspiring audiences to be better or giving them a language of betterment, the intent to purchase and the uplift in brand consideration is always huge. And I want to share with you just one story that we did recently. And this was a a campaign that we worked on with Clinique. And the target was young British girls. And the truth of the matter is that young women have a really tough time in their lives these days. Internet trolling, body consciousness, the huge popularity demands of being in social media. So what we did is we went out and we created short videos of girls in things like the charity sector or in the arts sector. And we also asked them to contribute quotes, and you can see some of them there, that they could share with their girlfriends or their sisters or their mothers and their daughters. And it was very, very simple, but it was very real. And it was as if Clinique was just a friend sharing with them, chin up, you're going to make it, you are great as you are. And the results were astounding. We had 34 million impressions for this campaign. We had 600,000 social shares. And most importantly, because we are all sellers, Clinique had a 59% increase in uplift of brand perception. So truly, as all roads lead to Rome, let's hope that all of our roads are leading to ever better content marketing. And I just want to say that as we live in this new milieu, in this new environment, everyone's interest in great content, and most importantly, their access to it, has only increased. So if we can, as brands, can slide authentically into the language and the vocabulary in the forums and in the formats that millennials are consuming content, you'll only win. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Michael. And in the time limit, which is even more impressive. Thank you very much. So, finally, the final part of our Holy Trinity of content. We have Rahul Chopra, who is the CEO for Storyful.
Thank you. So thank you again for having me as part of this conference. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, Storyful is in the business of helping media organizations, both brands and publishers, leverage both insights coming from social as well as user-generated content. We've combined really smart technology with a global, diverse newsroom of traditional journalists, content marketers, and research analysts to extract real value from social and then tell powerful stories. What I wanted to talk a little bit about today was moments, because it seems that everyone can't stop talking about moments. Whether it's Google and explaining to you how to take advantage of micro moments, or Facebook and their explanation of what to do on their platform when it comes to drawing or capturing the attention of the audience you're trying to reach. Moments are indeed having a moment. But what's the right content when it comes to actually taking advantage or capitalizing on those moments? Because we absolutely agree at Storyful. I have a bet with the office if I can say the word moments 99 times before I finish the presentation, so bear with me. We absolutely agree, but what's the right content to use when it comes to these platforms, when it comes to taking advantage of these moments, especially as the landscape of storytelling is completely and utterly changed. With the amount of content that's being created every single day across all these platforms, and these stats are, this slide is not that old, and these stats have absolutely increased. In some ways, it's created a problem. Brands are less influential than they ever were. What do you do when 92% of people are more likely to trust peers over traditional advertising when it comes to purchasing decisions? And what do you do in the age that we live in of democratized storytelling, where everyone and anyone is a storyteller? How do you stand out? We believe that in a mobile social world, that the challenge is creating the right content and capitalizing on the right moment is utterly important, because we're living in a world where you're absolutely living by the touch or dying by the swipe. Sorry. Come on. Oh, there it is. And we actually think the opportunity is sitting right in front of us. Life is the best storyteller. If you think about it, what social has allowed us to do is tell our stories that create these moments of joy, of surprise, of happiness. And what social has also allowed us to do is to share that with the world. Why not leverage these stories to be able to tell your story and reach the audience that you're trying to reach? Because at the end of the day, what we found is that user-generated content is the world's largest natural resource. 80% of the internet today is UGC. But if I were to poll the room, most of you would think that, I'm venturing a bet, that would believe that UGC looks a lot like this. And a lot of it does. I actually like that, but not necessarily the best message to put across, depending on who you are. But there's a lot more that's out there. What's incredible about UGC is there's a moment or an experience that can capture exactly what you're trying to create or achieve across all these social platforms globally. It's incredible. And when leveraged the right way and capitalizing on these moments, you can tell a story that's absolutely incredible that is platform agnostic, like Olive Garden did in the US. If we can play the video. So what Olive Garden was able to achieve actually is a viral moment for themselves. This ad not only did incredibly well, but repositioned themselves and it was watched millions and millions of times over. There's a stat that says that when you combine user-generated content in this way and capitalize on these moments with created content, brands see a lift in engagement of almost 30%. So this works. And absolutely, in this age of democratized storytelling, the most powerful story is going to win out. You must earn that relationship. It cannot be bought when trying to reach the audience you're trying to reach. And what matters most when it comes to content creation is reaching that audience, capitalizing on things that they're wanting to engage with on the platforms that they want to. What this content allows you to do is not recreate the wheel every time, not recreate a bridge. Take advantage of what's happening and what people are talking about. The days of having to create an ad that runs in front of the content that people are sharing millions and millions of times over doesn't have to be. You can actually leverage that content yourself to tell a better story. And absolutely in a mobile social world, do you have to do that as glossy stories that are traditionally being created are running out of runway. So just in closing, as you're thinking through your tactics, remember, the opportunity to capitalize on these moments is real, and it's important, and can be done leveraging data, leveraging this great content that's being created across platform to tell the right message to reach the audience that you want to reach at the right time. Thank you.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, a slight microphone malfunction slipped off my shirt. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was very impressive, and I'm hoping you all learned a few things or two there. Sorry about this. I will hold this mic for a second while I just clip it to my shirt. Apologies. I've got very fat hands and fingers, so it struggles. There we go. We're back on. Thank you very much for that, guys. Much appreciated. All three of those gentlemen are going to be around for the rest of the day, so if you have any questions about capturing that moment, working out how to use that content efficiently and effectively into your campaigns, make sure you ask them some questions.